things. You can lose a pet, you can lose a family member, or you can just lose something in your life. And how do we cope with it? It's a very difficult thing. A lot of us throw ourselves into work, or we distract ourselves with social media or whatever it is. And we don't give ourselves the time, or don't allow ourselves that time. And is there something called healthy grief? And what's the difference? What is this? It's such a complicated kind of thing out there. And how do we deal with it? This is Carina from BreakFearFindFreedom, and I have a beautiful guest today, Dr. Kramer. Dr. Karen, and this is her level of expertise and her wheelhouse. She's written a book. We'll talk about that. But let's go into grief and what is it and what is healthy grief anyway? Hello, Dr. Karen. How are you today?
Very good, Carina. Thank you for the invitation.
Thank you so much for being here. I'm really excited to talk about this because it's something that, this morning when I was thinking about this conversation, I was thinking, wow, we go through life and we experience this and we experience that and we just go, and I'm just running through things, and we don't stop for a moment to appreciate life and appreciate that maybe we are grieving and it's okay. Well, tell us a bit, first of all, who are you? How did you get into this space? And then we'll take it from there.
Oh, excellent. Well, thank you. So I have been in the field of leadership development and executive coaching for over 30 years, working with teenagers through C-suite executives, working with companies like the CIA to non-government companies, United Way, Google, Nike, Boeing, American Express, and in different places all over the world. And that's the leadership side of it. So then I stepped back when I stepped out of the corporate world full time and started focusing on teenagers because I was seeing a lot of parallels. And then I started coaching the parents of the teenagers. Then come along here 6 years ago where the love of my life walked out of my life for Valentine's. Let's just get that context there, for Valentine's Day.
Wow.
And I thought, well, at that point in time, I've been coaching for over 25 years. And I thought I could, DIY myself through my own divorce, emotionally, I could get myself back to balance, which, by the way, even when we think we're good at it, I was the worst coach for myself. We're the worst coaches for ourselves, right? It's seeking out those people who can see those things that we cannot. But I spent almost the first year doing that, and also I started hiring other coaches and spent $36,000 on 4 different coaches, like business coaches, that then just kept me busy and pretty much distracted, but they weren't helping me deal with really what was underneath all that, Carina. So 5 years ago, or a year after that, I ended up stumbling across neuro-linguistics programming, NLP specifically, and expanded into the world of hypnotherapy, neuroplasticity. So in the last 5 years, have been master practitioner certified in those fields of study. And all of that it gave me an opportunity then to explore what's underneath us. So all the thoughts, the beliefs, the past traumas, the triggers, that when I was experiencing my divorce, I had all these past things that were coming up for me, and coaches were just trying to coach me over what was in front of me. Oh, you're going through a divorce? Here, let me coach you through how to get back into a new relationship. Well, getting back into a new relationship when I haven't dealt with the ish that was underneath that wasn't helpful. So that's how I backed into focusing on grief, Carina, is as I worked with over 1,200 individuals in the last 5 years, traveling as the head coach for the same organization, having my own clients, opening up my own wellness and retreat center and having clients here, I realized what was the common thread was grief. And just like you described it, it's much more than just death and dying.
Yes.
Grief is in all areas of our life. So even when it came to my book, I was finding those who were grieving relationships. So whether it was a divorce or breakup, those who were grieving going into retirement because they didn't have the same structure as they did before, grieving as an empty nester. Because it was their last child or maybe their first child that was going off, maternity losses. So actually there is a term that I put in my book called disenfranchised grief, which basically is a term that is used for any other type of grief that is not necessarily seen or recognized by society as grief, yet we go through some of the same processes associated with grief. So my definition of grief expands what the Google definition of it is. I say it by Google, so if you were to Google it, it says something like when you have a major event in your life where you have a significant emotion. I add on to that, when what once was is no longer, which
Yes.
also can be the loss of hopes and dreams.
Wow, I love that because as you were speaking, and I know because, I do coaching as well, but on a different level. But that's it. We always just look at surface things, and it's always about that underlying thing. And if you go deeper, you find it, and it changes everything. I just want to go back for a moment and just make a comment about how it's, someone says to how to, this is quite a horrible saying that someone says, like, to get over someone, you have to get under someone, or whatever that saying means, whatever that saying is. And for me, it's always like so shallow, because you're just going to attract the same person unless you do that work within yourself. You're going to attract the same person into your life, just a different name and a different face, but it's going to be the same person. So I love that. And again, that multifaceted definition of grief. So that is such a beautiful thing. And with all your experience, it's like takes you to like now what, and how did you heal yourself?
Yes. So there are various different grief scenarios that have come up in my life. I think for all of us, when we're stepping into this world, it all starts with our own healing. So I'm going to take you back. I had one of those days. I had one of those days about 12 years ago where Carina, I just lost it, which, by the way, for those, you don't know me, but I'm not one of those people who just flies off the handle. But that day I did. I flew off the handle. I was screaming at my kids. I was bickering with my husband. I cussed out my brothers. I normally don't cuss. I hung up the phone on my mom. I had just lost it. And I'll come back to what led to that in just a bit. But after I had that chaotic day where I looked back and realized, okay, I just lost it all over everybody. My kids are like tiptoeing around me. My husband's like, okay, honey, we're just kind of waiting for you to settle down. My mom's trying to call me. My brothers are not quite sure what to do. I said, okay, I need help. So I then thought, okay, I need to go to a traditional talk therapist, the therapist to help me, which, by the way, as I continue with my story, there are the therapists that are out there that are lovely to help us, as well as the medical professionals, because I'm talking about that too. So I want to honor that. And here's my story. So there's an and in there. And here's my story. So I went to this therapist. I want to honor the fact that I think she was newly minted, a new therapist, because she looked at my degrees and my background, and I could tell was a little bit nervous about like what to do. And she briefly took some information about what had led up to that day. But then she said, I think you have situational anxiety. Like, don't you think you have situational anxiety? To which I'm thinking, I'm not even quite sure what that is, but okay, you're the professional. So I walked out of a 40-minute session with a checkbox that diagnosed me with situational anxiety. The heck is that? And it didn't help me. She also sent me on to anxiety group at that point in time. I didn't get a lot out of it at that point in time. And I also didn't feel heard. So hear that from me. I didn't feel heard. So then here about a couple weeks after that, my husband's like, I had another mini meltdown with my son, and my husband's like, okay, we need to do something. I said, okay, well, I was in my early 40s. Maybe I'm premenopausal. Maybe this is all hormonal stuff. I'll go to my doctor. Within 2 minutes, Carina, after being with my doctor and explaining what had gone on leading up to that day, she cut me off and prescribed me drugs.
Wow.
How many women get prescribed drugs in here? So I've been labeled, psychologically labeled, prescribed drugs. Then I come home and I'm like, I don't do drugs. So I'm like, no, I'm not going to go that route. So my husband's like, why don't you go to this 7-day destination spa, which is in Vista, by the way. I know we're local, so Calavie and Vista. And I loved it. I got to get away from everything. I had healthy meals, exercises. I had massage, acupuncture, facials, wonderful. Within 2 hours of being back, I was bickering with my loving husband again. Had nothing to do with him and everything to do with me. So being labeled by a therapist, prescribed drugs by a doctor, temporary solution from a spa, and they were all just dealing with the symptoms. What had happened on that day? I had just put my 18-year-old beloved cat to sleep on that day. Had called my mom. I was already in an emotional state. Had called my mom to tell her, and she mentioned something to me about family, and I'll come to in just a minute, which was like the straw that broke the camel's back, and that's what led it. But what had happened a month before that is I had just laid to rest. My 90-year-old beloved father had passed away, and I had not dealt with my own grief. I had not dealt with my own grief. So here it was a month later, putting my beloved cat to sleep. I'd started to go into the grief process and then had that straw that broke the camel back. So I hit the grief process hard with anger first, because I was stepping into it from all these logistical perspectives. And once I started going to our well-meaning professionals, I was just labeled and prescribed drugs, and nobody took the time to understand that I was honestly going through grief. So Carina, in answering your first question, is really understanding that at the time I was seeking out what many people do. And again, our therapists and our medical professionals are there to provide. So please understand is like, yes, there's a time for labels. There's a time for medications to come back to balance. This is all about a missed opportunity to really focus on grief. So in the healing process, it really came along years later, and really 5 years ago. So when I hit my divorce, years after that, I'm like, I'm not going to go through the therapy route again. I'm not going to go through the medical. I don't want to be labeled again. So I'd already discounted that. And really when it stepped into the world of, in my case, it was neurolinguistics programming. So it's stepping into a place where it started understanding some of the programming that I had, the beliefs, the past traumas, the experiences that I had. And when I did that and easily was able to unearth and release those, it allowed me then to step in when I had other grief experiences, such as the loss of my beloved mother, 2 weeks after the loss of my beloved brother, back to back, 2 weeks apart, here 2 years ago.
Wow.
When I stepped into that grief space, I was able to do it healthfully and be able to be present and process through that in such a way, because I had released a lot of those things associated with grief.
Yes. Well, first of all, my condolences for your mother and your brother. Much love for that.
Thank you.
That is a beautiful story. Okay. And I know we do, a lot, this is Break Fear, Find Freedom, right? So we deal a lot with stigmas and labels, and we won't go into that because it's a whole societal issue that we slowly through all these conversations can break down those walls. But this isn't about that right now. I don't think so. To be able to have loved yourself enough, and I'm going to use those terms, loved yourself enough to give yourself the space to actually go in and deal with those issues, whatever they were. How did you get to that point where you realized, or was it even a realization where it was like, this is what's happening and this is what I need to do? Or was it just an intuition or a knowing?
Well, it's interesting that you mentioned intuition and knowing. So I should say this. I am a product of an engineer dad and a clairvoyant psychic mother. So I can talk woo-woo and science in the same sentence. So I'm sure much of this also was intuitive led. But what led me to think about when you started that question was a realization that when I first, as I mentioned, when my husband left, I knew, I said, I don't want to go down the same route again. The routes before did not help me. I don't want to be labeled again. I don't want to be prescribed drugs again. Yes, I can go to a spa, I can get massages, but I know that that's only going to be temporary relief. And I honestly wanted to have more permanent relief. So as I mentioned, I turned to the various different life coaches and business coaches at that time. And it wasn't until I realized I was making progress. One of the things I did for my divorce is I built my backyard oasis, as I'm looking at it right now. I built my backyard oasis. I lost 25 pounds. I had a wonderful, at that time, 50th birthday with over 100 people. Like, I had accomplished certain things. And also, when I built my backyard, there's funds that were put into that, right? So, but I also had a limiting belief that said that that cost too much. You're not, some of the limiting beliefs were still playing in the back of my mind that started to sabotage the success that I was having. And so I was realizing that, yes, I'm getting only so far, that it's similar to some of the experiences I was doing with some of my clients and getting them only so far. But if we're not dealing with what was underneath all that, I'm just going to continue to sabotage myself. So that was the point to where I said, what else is out there that's really going to help me get rid of these voices that are still playing in my head? I'm making progress, but if I still keep on listening to these voices, they're going to continue to sabotage the success I'm creating in my life. And I then just happened to stumble upon, again, the work that I do now. So that was the big realization there. I did not want to sabotage myself. I did not want to sabotage the success. And that was the biggest thing for me.
I love that. And as you were speaking, I was thinking about how we do that all the time in our lives. And you can pick it up even speaking to your friends. It's like, whoa, you know what? We shouldn't go to that restaurant because it's way too expensive, and you're wasting money or whatever it is, I'm thinking now that's coming up from my limiting beliefs. You don't waste money. And that's what I heard as well. It's like, you've got this beautiful oasis, but it's a waste of money almost, because how can you do that? So it's this whole feeling of lack when there's so much around us. So I've seen, that's a huge thing. So how did you deal with that? How did you change your mindset and realize that, well, you know what? I'm worthy of great things, right? Look at what I've done. I mean, look at how much you've done. Look how much you've accomplished. Look how many people you've helped and served. And yet you couldn't give yourself a beautiful oasis outside your door.
Yes.
So how did you shift that? What changed that perception? And what made you realize that, whoa, you know what? Hey, life is abundant.
It is. And I'm going to talk more about the scarcity shift too into that abundance. So not only was I going through the middle of my divorce, like just talking about my backyard oasis. So I'm going through the middle of my divorce. At that point in time, it had been about 9 years after I had stepped out of the corporate world So 6-figure corporate world, and was the stay-at-home mom pretty much for our 3 youngest. So blended family, 5 kids. The 3 youngest were at home. So it was doing less travel. We made a decision. I would be the one that would stay home with the kids. And then I was still doing, to be honest, I love my work. So that's where I was doing more of the private coaching work.
Yes.
But it was less about making the money and just continuing to do the work. So when I did it, it was more about just the additional money. I wasn't doing it to supplement the income that we had. So it was really my husband for pretty much almost 10 years who's bringing in the income. I say that to say when we divorced, what came out of it was, okay, I haven't been in the corporate world. I haven't made significant amount of money because I hadn't been charging all that for my clients. So I was awarded temporary spousal support. So put that on just a minute. Here I am, I'm awarded temporary spousal support. It was up to the judge to decide when that was going to be taken away from me. Okay, so just at the context, when it was going to be taken away from me. And I made a decision to start building out this big backyard oasis. Now, context here. I had some funds that were set aside that I had already marked, and I had been marked for probably 20 years to say, hey, because I built my house back in 2000 before I was even married. And I decided I was going to put some landscaping in the front. So I had marked those funds, but obviously building the backyard pool, once you build it and you start adding on to it with landscape and all the other stuff, it ended up being 4 times that amount. Okay, so put that context there. Yeah. 4 times the amount that I already had marked. I'm going through a divorce. I already have a judge that says you're going to get temporary spousal support, but I'm going to take it away at any time. And I also have my ex who's looking at me going, why are you taking my money, spousal support, and you're building that pool? Like, what are you doing? You're building that pool. You're wasting my money. Why am I paying? So just put that in context, okay? Right there. So on the outside, there were some things that were looked at as crazy. And if my dad was still alive, it would be my loving father. Again, it would be, which was his voice I was hearing. It costs too much. What are you doing? You're wasting money, all these different things. But also there was this intuitive drive to say, I am doing this for me, and I know I'm doing it for a bigger picture. I didn't know at the time. The bigger picture was this then is the place that I opened up 1.5 years ago as the Villa Vision Wellness and Retreat Center. So I had an intuitive vision as to why I was doing it. Even at the time, logically, it didn't make sense. Yes. So I set the context that was all going on, from the judge to my ex to the little, my dad intuitively in my ear, but I had this intuitive vision, all of that. And even my mom lovingly said, if you're going to do it the way you want, don't wait. So I listened to my mom's voice. I listened to my intuition, but again, you could hear all those voices were playing around in my mind. So having all that chaos that was going on, so you could just imagine when I stepped into this world around the listening more to my intuition, trusting my intuition, and knowing that I needed to do something that released and let go of the voices that in the past were there to keep me safe.
Yes.
We have the voices that are there in the past to keep us safe in the past. My parents were born in the 1920s. They were raised during the Depression. My dad's voices were there because those were the voices that he had when he was raised in the 20s and 30s. That cost too much. He was the one at the age of 12, was the busboy at a local restaurant to bring home scraps of food in the mid-30s to feed his 2 younger brothers and his alcoholic father after my grandmother left them. That was the way in which my father was raised. And of course, those who were raised in the Depression have certain beliefs about scarcity and certain beliefs about money. And so this is perfect. So when I came along, again, later generations, my dad's programming was playing out. Even though he was in a different financial situation, he was a saver. He was a saver and a saver and a saver to the point where, yes, he verbalized and also showed up in many different ways around finances. And even after his passing, that was playing out at that point in time. But those voices and that programming that I had developed because of my dad's program did not help me at that point in time. I did have certain savings that were available to help me. I actually did go into my 4 hours of divorce mediation. And even though what the money that I literally had in my checking and savings wasn't enough. I'm just going to put that in quotes right now, not a belief. It was like with what I was doing, it was enough to carry me forward. But I also had savings that were going to support me. I also had savings that were also going to help support the building of the back. It wasn't like I was poor. It wasn't like I was going to go on food stamps. It wasn't like I was going to become homeless. I had these other opportunities and savings that were there. I just needed to open up and release. So I walked into the 4 hours of divorce mediation and literally said to my lawyer, I want to let go of the spousal support. To which he's like, wait a second, these numbers don't match up. Like, should you not at least hold on for another 6 months or such and such? And I said, no, I do not want a judge to decide for me my own financial freedom. I do not like getting the money with the energy attached to my ex each time to look at me and look at what I'm doing and building the pool and taking a trip or buying clothes or doing something for myself, and that negative energy of saying, why am I paying for all this stuff for you? I said, I want to let that go. I want to step into my own financial freedom, to let go of the judge, to let go of my ex, to let go of this divorce, and know that the abundance will come, to truly step into that. But it was also around doing that energetic work like you and I do, Carina, to be able to let go of those negative voices, those limiting beliefs, those scarcity and lack beliefs and energy and emotions, to truly step into a place of abundance and know I'm not going to be attached to what a judge or my ex or anybody else says about me. And I've succeeded. And it is to the point, the backyard and everything else, it is all for an intuitive purpose. So it allowed me to trust myself that this was all for a purpose. It was all coming to be, even though logically people looking at it from the outside were like, that looks kind of crazy. Why is she doing that? But I touched into my intuitive being, and everything has come away just beautifully and continues to blossom in abundance.
Oh, that's even a more beautiful story, because it's just, I'm watching, this is Break, Fear, Find Freedom, right? And yes, you've just explained this beautiful concept right now. You just broke that freedom. How much power did you have that day to be able to say, you know what? No more. I don't need this. It's not about need anymore. I am the power in my place, and I'm not going to be controlled. I'm not going to be defined by anybody else. So, wow, I have to commend you. That is such a beautiful story.
Thank you.
Is. Because now as you're speaking, I can just see the flowers flourish, and it's just like, oh, I don't need those strings or those chains anymore around me. And I know we've gone off grief for a bit, but I'm just going to bring it in again, because it's like you were releasing chains of grief as well in some manner. So again, how it's all interlinked.
It is. It is all about grief. It is, how do we? So in Healthy Grief, so in my book Healthy Grief, I have a 5-stage framework that is part of it, and it really is directly related to grief, Carina. From that is to acknowledge that, even back to the definition, when I said it's a significant event where you have an emotion when what once was is no longer. When we have any kind of event that comes up, what makes it grief is much more to do with what is our past traumas, triggers, and limiting beliefs that are underneath that, right? It's, my husband walked out that day. Boom, that was the event. The way in which I acted and reacted about it, again, was all driven by what's in the subconscious and unconscious, right? That's all that grief is. I was acting out of that. So when I go through the 5-stage framework that I have in Healthy Grief, part of it is getting an idea about where are you in your grief process. Because I've had so many people that have talked to me, whether they're clients or part of my research, or even the 30 grief survival case studies that are in here. And some of the things that they mention is saying, I'm alone, I was lost. Like, I didn't know, I felt like I was the only one. Like, this doesn't happen to everybody else. It's only happened to me, or it's happening to me and nobody else will understand me, right? So I'm alone, and I'm also lost. Those are the two key words. I'm alone and I'm lost. So there's an analogy, and again, this is going to go into the second version of Healthy Grief because there's so much more that I've talked to. But imagine a mall map, Carina. So you're walking in, or let's step back. Let's imagine that you're going on a road trip somewhere. You're going on a road trip, and you're going to go hiking with somebody. You're meeting somebody up, and you're going to go hiking. And as you're driving along on this road trip through a state or city that you're not familiar with yet, you realize you forgot your hiking boots. Okay, you've forgotten your hiking boots. You don't want to stop, turn around. You want to get on the road, and you think, okay, I need to get hiking boots along the way. And I'm going to wait until I stop to where I'm hungry and I need to go to the bathroom. So along this road, you see a mall, right? A mall has something to eat, go to the bathroom, and also a place where you can more than likely get your hiking boots. Yes. So you've never been there before. So the first thing you're going to do is you're going to walk into the mall and look for what? A kiosk, right? One of the mall maps. So when you walk into the mall and look for the mall map, the second thing you're going to do is going to look down at the various different stores and things that they have in there to see if they do have what you need. Where can I get hiking boots? What food do they have? Where are the bathrooms? So, okay, I found it. I found various different footwear places, but I specifically want the one that is going to give me the hiking boots. And they have a food court. I don't want hot dog on a stick. I'm really hungry. Let's go for In-N-Out because I really want a burger. There's multiple different bathrooms. Okay, so you've located that. Now, you're not going to be able to just find wherever you want to go until you look at the map, not only indicate where these stores are, but also know where you are first. Yes. To be able to go. So if I, for example, really need to go to the bathroom, and there are multiple different bathrooms that are around here, I'm not going to go to the one on the opposite side of the mall. I'm going to go to the bathroom that's near me, but I have to know where I am first. Mm-hmm. So I use that analogy, even in my masterclass around Healthy Grief, I use that analogy because knowing where we are in our grief process gives us some sense of grounding, some sense of I'm not alone. I know this space. I'm in the mall. Today I know that I'm right here. I know these are the various different things that the support mechanisms that are around me. And I know that I will create even my own unique path to find my way to get what I need to eventually find my way out of the mall, to find my way back to my car, and to find my way back on that road to whatever that next phase of my life is after grief. So that's a big part of what Healthy Grief is. And the book is that I start off with some background information it actually talks about limiting beliefs that are in here without all the jargon. I do have let's set up how grief will settle in the body. That's another big piece of this, why it's named Healthy Grief. Unprocessed grief will settle in the body. But it starts off with a background. The second part of it is the framework, the simple, easy framework that can be used with anybody, say age 2 on, to any different type of loss or grief. And then a majority of it has the 30 grief survival case studies that are in here. My own clients, some of my own stories, as well as others that are broken up into 7 different categories, from death and dying to intimate relationships like divorce and breakups, to other relationships like family estrangements and friendship estrangements, maternity losses, whether it's before or soon after the birth, to career changes that are happening, identity crisis such as empty nester, retirees, and the last section I call trilogy is when you have complex grief. 3 or more different types of losses happen all at the same time. That's a majority of what's in here for inspiration as well as our case studies, because I put the framework on top of it. So people who are gravitating to a certain story or a certain type of loss can also then look at how they then walked through the framework, the healthy grief framework, to be able to process through that loss. And then the last section is just resources that are both online as well as in the book.
Wow, I love it. It's so comprehensive.
Yeah.
And so, wow, well, congratulations on that. That's a beautiful thing. And remember, everyone, all the details will be in the description box. Now, to go back, I'd just like to I have to go deep into this as well. We know, I mean, there's been research. I mean, we've always known, like I've always known on an intuitive level about how our emotions affect our body, right? And, you know, people have cancer or they have arthritis or whatever they have, or prostate cancer, whatever it is. We know, like I said, there's been proof. So I'm going to say it as we know, that emotions cause this. Now I'm going to put it back to you. Grief is it's a very complex emotion. How does it manifest in the body? And I know that's a very general question, and of course everyone's individual, but what have you seen?
Healthy grief actually started with 3 of my clients here, March of 2023, who I found in working with them, so clearing out a lot of their emotions and limiting beliefs, was finding their body was coming back to balance, i.e. healed. So that got me on the path of then writing the book to understand how the mind-body connection, and I say unprocessed grief, will settle in the body. I don't even say may anymore. Unprocessed grief will settle in the body. You and I are like right there on that.
Yes.
So I will say how in just a bit, but I'm going to talk about the clients that led into this book. The first client was somebody I was working with who had significant, I will say, clinically depression that was there, but a lot of sadness. And after she had mentioned that before we started doing the deep work together. And when I do the deep work, I actually do it within 3 days, because 98 to 99% of the work is done within those 3 days. And then I follow them for 3 months afterwards. So that just sets a context about what I'm about to say. So before going in and doing the deep work, she said, I have a cyst, and one of them, I have an ovarian cyst that is so inflamed, I'm about ready to go in for surgery. So at that point in time, I just noted it and then went on. So I wasn't really making the mind-body connection, although I will come back to something where I focused on that just because I was so focused on what is the intention for this breakthrough, just noted it. Mm-hmm. And so we did the breakthrough work, and then we had a follow-up here about a month after that. And she kept on saying, the surgeon, the doctor, and I were so surprised that it was no longer there. She kept on saying, surprise, it's no longer there. So I came back and I said, well, tell me about that. She said, we went in for it, and it's not uncommon for cysts to recede. So keep that in mind. Sometimes cysts recede. In this time, she said it was so surprised because the cyst, it didn't look like it was there at all. It had completely healed over. It was just not there, no resident of it. And in my mind, I'm like, well, yes, of course, because cysts are pockets of sadness. And she's like, what? And I realized what I had just said. What does this come from? Many people are familiar with Louise Hay's You Can Heal Your Life. What I have been carrying around with me for almost 5 years, it is my mind-body Bible. And yes, it is also in Healthy Grief. She is the endorser of my book. Also, she used my book for her own purposes in regards to relationships. I say that because she's public about it. It is the Healing Questions Guide. You can see I use this. The Healing Questions Guide by Wendy Jensen is one. It is my mind body Bible. It is one where it takes the different parts of the body and asks questions. So even though I knew from kind of a Louise Hayes and also questions in here that cis could be associated with deep sadness, it also can be related to other different types of beliefs and emotions. And also from medically, could it be some other purpose? Yeah, I'll put that out there. It could be for medical purposes. But I think for this, Carina, I'm right there with you. There is so much information that's out there around how when we have stuck energy, I'm going to talk about it that way, stuck energy in the body due to trauma, due to significant emotions, due to limiting beliefs, that stuck emotion, it prevents our body from healing, and on the flip side can also cause more ailments. And to support, Carina, what you're saying, Dr. Gabor Mate, The Myth of Normal, in his book as a physician talks about it. Dr. Basil van der Kolk, who is the author of The Body Keeps a Score, those are two people that are also, along with Wendy's book, are also heavily referenced in the Healing Questions Guide, or the Healthy Grief, because they actually have Basil's book here, as well as The Myth of Normal. So a lot of the research that we're talking about, people who as therapists, as doctors, are also saying there's much more to the body than just a surface level. There's a lot more stuck energy.
Yes.
So with my client, yeah, it was realizing that, yes, when we healed and released a lot of the sadness, in this case associated with her divorce, her body bounced back and the cyst was completely gone. Then at that time, I also had a client who came to me who had been diagnosed with stage 2 colon cancer. So when we did only a 4.5 hours worth of work, so I did a half a version of what I typically do with my clients, and amazing results from there to bounce back. And what came from that work, and again, it's all unconscious and subconscious, right? And Karina, you're doing this work, so it's all subconscious. It's not like you come and say, my clients don't come to me and say, oh, I have this physical ailment, and I know it's because of this event. That's your conscious mind speaking. And in many cases, it could, more than likely, it's going to be something that is much earlier in your life that you just don't have the conscious recollection of it, but your unconscious and subconscious mind knows. You're nodding your head. Yes, yes.
Yes.
And in this case, when I was working with my client, what came back to it, and it was even evidence in the Healing Questions Guidebook, is the guilt over not being able to save her husband 5 years prior, who had died by suicide. And also, even more back, her subconscious mind went even further back and said to be able to release, when she was 6 years old, she was also sexually molested by a family member, and released that from her body and allowed her body to then come back to balance. So those two experiences are what inspired healthy grief. And yes, I do say unprocessed grief will settle in the body. I'll also say around the same time, the one who had the stage 2 colon cancer also referred another client who had stage 4 pancreatic cancer at this point in time, and did work with her. No promise, because again, as I started stepping into this, my intention was not really around the mind-body connection, but I was just finding my clients having these healings as part of the process. So I always say there's no guarantee. So, and I'd never worked with a client who was as far along in the stages as this woman was at that time. So a month after working with her, a lot of positive markers were coming back. Then she kind of flatlined in her responses. And unfortunately, she passed away on August 31st of last year, while I was a month away from finishing my manuscript. So this book is actually dedicated to her. She's one of the few people that this book is dedicated to. And in regards to her, and I'm getting chills on this now, as well as her own initiative, is this book is also to get it out there so people do not get to the stage of stage 4, or ailments or cancers or heart disease, which, by the way, cancers and heart disease are the top 2 leading causes of deaths within the United States, according to the CDC in 2022. If we understand energetically what's underneath those and can be able to release those, we're going to find much less cancers and heart diseases that are sitting there and people passing away due to those. So it's another, thank you for bringing up the mind body, because that's another initiative behind this book.
That's beautiful. And I just want to mention the heart. You know, we go through life with so many, and it relates a lot to grief, right? Where you go through life losing things, or losing friends, or whatever, you know, you go through grief that you sometimes don't even know you, like we've been talking up to now, sometimes you don't even know you have that grief. And how it, when it's not dealt with, it affects the heart, which is obviously this beautiful organ that's supposed to be alive and wide open. But we're so afraid to open it that we close it up and we squash it. And then I'm thinking, why do you think that heart disease is one of the major causes of death, probably in the world?
And so along the lines, I'll give you a flavor for that. And I'm reading, by the way, from the Healing Questions Guide. So heart problems, many different things that are in here, but just here's some of the questions associated with this. What am I was like, that doesn't, okay. What will it take for me to become aware of and understand the laws of love I have not yet understood? What feelings of compassion am I resisting to feel? What would my life look like if I no longer needed the approval of those who are incapable of giving it to me? What is going on in my family that needs healing? What will it take for me to contribute to that healing? Who do I need to forgive? What will it take for me to completely forgive myself? What responsibility am I trying to take control of? What do I need to do to heal this relationship that hurts so badly? Who am I hoping will rescue me, but they never show up? What will it take to relieve them of this expectation and rescue myself?
Yes. Now, of course, now we go back. I love that. Well, thank you for that. First of all, sorry, I get so excited.
No, you know, I'm just
thank you. Because what's coming to me as well is how we brought up. Well, I mean, I'm an avid reader. I'm an author, right? You know, so I love books and words, and so all my life I've loved fairy tales, and I'm a bit of a Pollyanna myself. Okay. Mm-hmm. But on that note, you know, you brought up with these beautiful stories of the knight in shining armor coming and rescuing you and taking you, and you go and live happily ever after with whatever, you know. And I'm not, and I apologize if I'm sounding, I don't want to sound like cynical right now, okay, because that's not where I'm coming from. But what I'm saying is that that's probably one of the reasons that we have this heartache, okay? We should be starting to rescue ourselves first, right? And we must realize that we need to be able to validate ourselves, and we need to approve of ourselves before. We can't expect other people to approve of us or to validate us, because they've got their own stuff, and how dare we even do that? What are your thoughts on that?
It is a theme, as I hear you. Yes, definitely, Carina. So I had a client yesterday and one this morning that is related to just that. And what came up was, okay, so the client yesterday, it was around seeking external validation for herself. So it showed up with her parents, with her brother, with her friends. So recognizing when we have a pattern that's out there. So underneath that was that seeking of approval, seeking external validation. So that was one client yesterday. The client this morning was around raised in a very dysfunctional family and never got the attachment and connection and approval from parents. So here she is as a mother. And really, when we're doing our work, and she's 2 months past the breakthrough, was around, she had recognized that the more she loved herself, she was less about trying to seek out her mother's approval, where logically she knew my mom is not capable of that. Like if my mom came back into my life, she would not be a good mother. She would not be a good grandmother to my kids. But there was a part of her brain that was seeking that out, logically knew that wouldn't happen. So the reason why I brought up both of those situations is a recognizing when, and the term I use is when you're putting your need for your happiness or your joy or the love that you need in somebody else's pocket. Like it's dependent upon my mother coming back into my life or my friends or whoever showing me the validation that I want. So one of that is just acknowledgement. Like I had another gentleman I worked with years ago who came to me who actually, ironically, had a heart attack. It was broken heart syndrome, which that is a true thing, right? Had a heart attack. His wife had left him, and yes, all these tie together. His wife had left him a year prior to this. She had, in this case, she had cheated on him, had left him. And by the time he came to me, he was like so literally brokenhearted. So also think about the words that we use can actually manifest in our body. So he was verbally, I'm brokenhearted, had just had a heart attack. And when he came to me, he said, what I want is I want my wife back. I want my wife back. It's been a year. She cheated. I just want her back. And so as a coach, I was acknowledging where he was in the moment, like what his feelings were, and shifting him to recognize that if we're doing the energy work, we have no control. Like in all those 3 clients, there's no control over other people. Like in this case, there was no control over his wife as to whether she was going to come back into his life. The only thing he needed to do was focus on himself. So shifting around, well, who are you? Who do you want to be? What excites you in your life? And we worked on bringing that love, putting that love back in his pocket, that hope, that joy back in his pocket, getting grounded in who he was as an individual, not who he was with the void of missing his wife. So who he was, getting him grounded in that. And the beautiful thing about all these clients and even this one gentleman story, even though it was about 5 years ago, he called me up and he said, I want to go to lunch with you because I want to share what happened. So it was a month after we did the work. He said about 2 weeks after doing that work, he said his estranged wife reached out to him and wanted to talk and reconcile. And he said, I will tell you, Dr. Karen, the time she reached out, had it been prior to the work, I would have been like, yes, let's do this. Let's talk, let's reconcile. He said, I was so calm and at peace as to who I was and where I was, that it actually wouldn't have mattered one way or the other as to what came from that. He said, I actually didn't even respond to her immediately. I waited a couple days. She sent me another message. I finally agreed to, we had a conversation, and he said, I was like, I didn't place any expectations on what was going to come out of the conversation. He said, but I will tell you now, a month later, he says, my bride and I are back together again. And he specifically used that word bride. He said, it may not work out, but I actually see a different level in her. I am more grounded in myself. And so this was, and I actually had a conversation with him 2 months ago. So that's probably why he's coming to light too, is it had been going on. Now, again, this was about 5 years ago. So it had been at least 4 years, 4.5 years now that he has been with his bride again. They'd been married for 20 some odd years. Like they had children that were teens and 20s and had reconciled again after being apart for a year. But much of it had to do with him just grounding himself with himself, taking back that love. And honestly, to that point too, which I'm sure you've experienced this as well, when our clients take that energy back and come back to balance and forgive and all this, it also has an energetic ripple effect. So I was not surprised that when he focused on himself, his estranged wife was energetically picking up on that energy. And it allowed that space for reconciliation. That's not saying it happens in all situations, but I am 100% certain that when he worked it on himself, rather than trying to grab her energetically back in his life, he opened up and she sensed that and created that space and opportunity for building upon that relationship again.
Yes, I love that story. And again, we're talking again about, thank you for that, Dr. Karen. That is a beautiful story as well, because again, now I'm thinking about the lack, how when you're in this lack, when you feel like you're not worthy, it's like, oh, you have to be in my life, please be in my life. I can't live without you, or I need you, or whatever. Even if you think you don't, or even if you think you want them in your life, but it's like, oh, please, like, please, I need you in my life. And of course, if someone does that to you, you think like, that's scary, go away.
It's unhealthy.
It's unhealthy and it's scary. It's like, whoa, what is going on here? And of course, it's all on an energetic level. And you don't realize that the butterfly effect is real.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
As soon as and now you've showed in your example here, where as soon as you realize, like, I am worthy, and you know what? Not everyone deserves to be in my life. No. And it's not about you, it's about me. And it's not in a selfish sense at all, because it's about me in my life. You have your life, and let's live and let live. And if we're meant to be together, somehow it'll work out, like your client, right?
Yes.
And again, it's that beautiful attitude that once you get to that feeling of abundance, and that is freedom, right?
It is. Yeah. And there is, right there with you, there's a different energy, and it is, I say, unhealthy when we want, and let's just say romantic relationships. Like, I want so much to have somebody in my life. Yes. Or because then what's underneath that? Does that mean that I'm not somebody myself if I don't have somebody in my life? Kind of like that typical rebound relationship after ending one. And you even talked earlier about jumping into other relationships. Same type of person, just a different name, right? We're going to continue to repeat those patterns until we learn the lesson and break the cycle, like stepping into a domestic violence relationship, and then we find another one, et cetera, et cetera. And also stepping back when we are grounded in who we are. And that's honestly some of the main focus for my clients, whether it's grief or anything else. It's let's come back to balance. Ground you in who you are. You are the most important relationship in your life. If you do not have that strong, grounded relationship with you, love yourself, know you are loving, you are worthy, you are enough, to truly love who you are, to look in the mirror and know that you are having that wonderful relationship with yourself, then how can you expect to have those healthy relationships come in your life? Because you're going to be seeking that piece of you in somebody else's pockets and somebody else's relationships. So the type of relationships is when you are so grounded in who you are and what you want, you naturally create and invite in, because people are attracted to your energy. People want, whether they're friends, whether they're families, whether they are career opportunities, whether they're whatever they are, you start to energetically attract that around you. That is abundance. That is abundance.
Yes.
And it's such a powerful place to be in.
Yes, because that really is power. Because there's no one can manipulate. Well, no one can manipulate you. Like, you allow people into your life, but that won't go into that. We'll just make it simple here. No one can manipulate you. No one can tell you what to do. No one can pull your strings, so to speak. You've cut those marionette strings. The puppeteer's gone.
Yes,
that's power, and that's freedom.
Yes, it is.
I love that. That is beautiful. And just to see it as well is like such a beautiful vision, right?
Yes, definitely.
So, wow, thank you for taking us down this road of beauty, because that's exactly what it is. I mean, we're all so beautiful. Human beings are so beautiful. Everyone's got something to give, and to just give to this community or whatever. There's beauty within everyone. And if we can just see that, but it starts with us. We have to be the change, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And if we don't see, because perception is projection,
Yes.
if we don't see beauty in ourselves, it is also hard to see beauty in others.
Yes, yes,
Mm-hmm.
yes,
Yeah.
yes. You always see like the angry person. If you walk around with a scowl on your face, everyone around you will have a scowl on their face, you know. If you walk around with a smile, suddenly, whoa, why is everyone smiling at me? It's a beautiful thing.
It is.
But you have to get to that point where you realize that, and that's the work you're doing. So thank you for that. It's beautiful. It's really beautiful. Wow, 1 hour goes by so quickly. It's crazy. I love this. This is so beautiful. Thank you for being here, Dr. Karen. Thank you for sharing all these things. And I think we probably have to have a follow-up at some point, because we touched on so many things, and it's just so, because life is so complex but yet so simple. So thank you. And before we go, I'd just like to know, have you found freedom?
Yes. I think I've shared some of those with you. Absolutely.
There's this one.
Yes. Yeah. Freedom in so many ways. And again, being more specific in your answer is, I described too around financial freedom when it came to my story about going through my divorce and making that decision to cut the strings in regards to taking charge of my own finances and not letting a judge decide when I was going to no longer receive that. So thinking about where in our life are we putting our decisions or control over our life in somebody else's pocket to continue to use that. Like the control over my finances was in the judge's pocket. I made a choice to take that back, to create my own financial freedom by cutting those marionette strings. I love that. And same energetically in regards to my ex-husband. So cutting those off. And also just even being in relationships. I'll say right now, it's been 6 years since my divorce. I had one brief relationship since then, okay? And also I have a lot of other wonderful relationships that are in here. It's given me amazing opportunity in the last 6 years to do what I just described here in just a moment, to become so grounded with who I am that I'm attracting individuals, yes, potential partners as well, into my space, and building wonderful friendships, and also lovingly know when they're not the best fit for me, because I'm in that abundant space and not feeling like I have to have somebody in my space to be somebody, because I am enough. I am lovable. I am worthy. And those 3 beliefs are the 3 beliefs that I hear the most from women in a space of lack. I'm not enough. I'm unlovable. I'm not worthy. So it is so powering and freeing to break free from that. And thank you, Carina, for all the work that you do. And even with these podcasts, to allow more people to break free and be.
Thank you. Yes. It's. I love this platform because we get the opportunity to talk about things that a lot of people are afraid to talk about. And the only way we're going to expose it and to change society and the world is to start here. So thank you so much for your time. I just love this. Thank you so much, Karen, Dr. Karen. And remember, people, share this. This is beautiful. This is life-changing stuff, right? Go and get Dr. Karen's book, and of course, reach out to her and speak to her, because she's like awesome, right? All the details will be in the description box. Like, share, subscribe, and share this with your friends, because this is priceless. Thank you.
And it can be life-saving too.
Yes, for sure. Thank you so much. Thank you, Dr. Karen. Thank you, everybody, for being here, and we'll see you soon. Bye for now.